Welcome back, everybody. And in the last video, I briefly mentioned in the January 2021 layout update that I was looking at replacing the computer that I use to run JMRI on the layout. And one of the things I was kind of looking at was a small form factor, so I could kind of maybe get the desktop, even if it was a micro PC, off the dispatcher's desk, so the dispatcher had a little bit more room. Something that was completely solid state, so I wouldn't have to worry about drives and whatnot, and also looking for a relatively low power consumption. I've been wanting to get into the Raspberry Pis for a long time now. So basically, since they came out, I just never really had any drive to kind of tinker with them. I've got a few friends that have done quite a few stuff with that and Arduinos. But when I saw the Raspberry Pi 4, this is the 8 gig model with its built-in Wi-Fi and the XB receiver features on it, which you use for the ProtoThrottles. I decided I was going to use that to replace a traditional desktop system that I use for the layout. What I really liked about it was this is pretty much it, other than a USB-C and a mini HDMI port. I can put some Velcro on this, Velcro it to the back of the monitor, and then the dispatcher has a clean workspace so they can use their train sheets and whatever else that they have, and we can get that desktop out of the way. So what I've been using right out of the box for a build was Steve Todd's JMRI Raspberry Pi access point. So this just gets everything set up right out of the gate. You just write his image that he's already got set up onto the SD card for your Raspberry Pi, and then just start it up. Everything on the image installs, and it's ready to go. It's automatically set, so it will check to see which kind of connection you have to the internet. It'll check to see automatically what kind of connection you have to your command station. It'll check to see if there's anything else out there that it wants to connect to. So, and it was also auto start JMRI Panel Pro and the Y throttle and the web server. So basically you can just plug this in, turn it on, good to go, and everything is just ready to go to run the layout right out of the box. It literally took probably 10 seconds after writing the image onto the SD card. So you can download Steve's image right from his website, mstevetodd.com. You can just download it. It needs at least an 8 gig micro SD card. And like I said, it'll set everything else up for you. So let's take a look at what we've been doing so far. So everything that you see here is how the system pops up from a cold boot. It will automatically open up Panel Pro, the JMRI system console, the Y throttle server, and seeing how we're not connected into the layout right now, it's running the LocoNet simulator. I connected the LocoNet through the layout with a local buffer USB that will automatically detect, and when it starts up, it will go from there. So like I said, it's got a couple other things in here that he's got set up on this custom image. There isn't too much change from the traditional Raspbian images that you would normally install on a Raspberry Pi. Pretty much he's got this set up so that it starts a whole bunch of stuff and then scans ports for you right off the get-go, so you don't have to do any tinkering trying to find out where it was. And also, if you don't know how to use the command prompt, you don't have to worry about it. So basically you could be a Linux dummy and be ready to go in a matter of minutes. I don't use Linux too much, so I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a dummy, but it does take me a while to kind of get used to it and kind of get my groove where I can kind of move about in command line a little bit more quickly than maybe 10-15 minutes ago. Also, he has a VNC installed on here, so if you want to set up your Raspberry Pi you can just remote into it, and you can remote in one of two ways. You can remote in through command line. Basically, if you were using kind of like, I can't remember, it was so long ago when I got my CCNP, where you could just, everything is going to be through the command line. You got to come in through command line. Pine. Yeah, Pine was one of the programs that we used to use. So you could use something like Pine to log in, and you would see everything on like a command line prompts. The other thing you can do through the VNC is you can actually see the desktop. So you can basically remote into the desktop as if you were using any other remote software on your Windows or Apple computer. And that basically allows you to be able to use with this VNC. You can access it from a smartphone, and you could also have a port forwarded externally through your router, so through your external network. So maybe your friend lives in Pennsylvania and they want to dispatch your layout. They can do that. They can remote right in and see your actual whole desktop, or you can have them go through Panel Pro and you can use the Panel Pro web server. But if you want to give them complete control over everything, you can just do right through the BNC. We'll close all this stuff down. So like I said, what we're doing right now is, because I'm not connected to the layout right now, I've just kind of been tinkering with this here and there until I can get it set up on the layout. I kind of wanted to set it up in advance before I get it connected. So what I've been adding is all the turnout tables. Gotta open up the actual panel first. Load panel. Right here, Homestead Northern. I haven't had JMRI running on a layout. So the last time I was actively running JMRI on the layout was when the Homestead Northern was the show layout. So some of you might remember the N-scale days of the Homestead Northern. In my old house, I had the rather large 22 by 40 layout, and then when I was renting for a while, looking for a new house to buy, I had what I called the show layout, and that show layout was 3 feet by 16 feet, and that went from show to show to show in New England, where it toured in Mass, Maine, New Hampshire for several years before we ended up buying our new house, and then the new Homestead Northern was reincarnated in HO scale. So the last time was probably 2013, 14. So Panel Pro is kind of like a bike. You kind of remember how to use it, but you got to kind of get your footing a little bit better, and then you can kind of use it here, and you feel a little bit more comfortable as you go along. So now I just loaded that panel. So I don't have anything in the panel editor right now because I've just been filling out the tables, and then I'm going to fill out the track chart right here. I've been working in CAD. We'll go to that window a little bit later, and I'll show you how I've been just adding the masts and whatnot. Hide panel, tools, tables, turnouts. All right, so everything's been set in here. So on the Homestead Northern in its current rendition, I'm sure everybody will complain that I change it so frequently that they can't keep track of it. That's because I'm not a big track plan drawing guy. I wing it, and then I try it, and if it doesn't work, then I make some changes to it, and that's mostly because even if I drew a track plan out, I can't figure out if it's going to work. I need to see it physically mocked up, run some stuff through it, and figure it out. So, but we have 1, 2, 3 interlockings on the main line. So the Homestead Northern has mainline section of track where it comes out of West End staging at CPA Toma and goes east to CPA Mandrake right before it goes into east end staging. In between that, we've got CPA Amoskeag, which is the eastern entrance to the, at one point in time, large Amoskeag yard. So we have those double track main line. So you have Toma, then Amoskeag, and then Mandrake. Off of CPA Mandrake is the BB River branch, or the BB branch as well, either or, where it goes in to serve the industrial section and the paper mills in the area. So what I've got here, I've got all the turnouts that are going to be controlled by the dispatcher. Even though the other turnouts off of the main line will have powered switches, they're not going to be dispatcher controlled other than the interlockings. All the other switches are going to actually have electric locks on them. They're not controlled by the dispatcher. My buddy Matt, who works for Pan Am in the signal department, he and I have been working on some things, and one of the things that he's been working on pretty diligently over the last several months is a union switch and signal style electric lock, where you open the box, move the lever to basically request the switch be open. The timer starts running down. When the timer runs down after basically dropping the signals on the block for you, it will then unlock the switch so you can throw the switch points to go in and do your work. So outside of the interlockings here at Toma, Amoskeag, and Mandrake, all those other switches are going to be electric time locks. Now, I will show on the dispatcher board that that lock has basically requested that the block be occupied so it drops the signals on either side, but the dispatcher will not be able to have any control over that whatsoever. They'll just be able to see that, oh, something is requested. Now, generally, somebody's going to tell the dispatcher we're looking to open up at XYZ location on track 1 or 2, but I don't want the dispatcher to be able to have the ability to control that lock or that switch. So on the turnouts here, I only have the ones that the dispatcher is going to be able to control. And it simplifies the table. It's going to make the drawing a little bit simpler, and I don't have to have a whole bunch of stuff in here that I don't need to worry about. So I got the sensors. Those I have not apparently started entering in yet. Lights, signal heads, and signal masts. So the signal masts have been installed. The layout, for those of you who don't know, is New England, focused on New Hampshire, kind of like the Manchester area and up towards the paper mills in the northern part of the state. So the layout is NORAC. So I have all of the signal masts in here. So you got the signals at Toma, the westward signals, eastward signals for tracks 1 and 2. Same thing with Amoskeag. There's a little bit of a nuance here in Amoskeag. So you have the eastward and the westward signals on track 1 and 2, but Amoskeag has a switching signal. If you've ever looked at CPF Derby on Pan Am, just outside of Air, or the Deerfield Yard, there is a switching signal that basically either gives you, it's a dwarf, it gives you either stop or restricting, and it just kind of lets you know that you can move through that switch, because that switch allows you to come in and out of the yard as well, but it also contains the switching lead. So there's that. The BB branch, or the BB River branch, goes back and forth as to whatever it is. There is a home signal and a distance signal there, and that comes into the main line at CPA Mandrake. So these are all going to be NORAC. They're all unknown, obviously, aspects right now because we are running in a LocoNet simulator. And then the logic is already taken care of. So I'm using the NS NORAC logic that is built into JMRI. which makes things a whole heck of a lot easier. I'm going to have Matt take a look at it to just double check, because it makes assumptions as to what aspect to display based upon certain factors. The next block beyond it, and then you can also add speeds, because NORAC is speed routing and speed signaling. So I'm going to have Matt, he's got the track plan. Like I said, he works for Pan Am, the signal department. He does this stuff professionally. He's an expert at it. So he can look at it and be like, yeah, you know, approach medium would go here, but it's not allowing you, so we'll have to do some modifications to the logic in JMRI to get it to force medium approach medium or whatever for that section based upon either normal speed, limited speed in that block beyond and the block for the interlocking itself. And then we're going to add some routes and blocks. So the blocks are already in here. Now the blocking, so the signaling is going to be using the Digitrax SE8Cs. The blocks use the 168, the BDL 168s. Now for switches, I'm not using any of the switch outputs on the SE8C or the BDL 168s. I'm actually using the Tam Valley Depot quad LNs because I use servos to control the switches. And they're relatively inexpensive. I really like them. They work really well, and they are a LocalNet product, so they will actually give feedback as well. And they also have some main output input and auxiliary output inputs, so you can use those to drive some other boards or whatever kind of things you kind of want to take a look at. So another one of the things we're working on using in here is Azatrax, so we can kind of use Azatrax for like the grade crossing situations, and we can use the blocks or the switch outputs to kind of just change some of the things. Like one of the things Matt was tinkering with last year at the Springfield show, and one of the things that's kind of common on the north shore of Boston that you don't really see anywhere else on NORAC is what they call like a double clear or a super clear. So for a distant signal in commuter territory on the north side of Boston, on Old Boston main track, you'll have the signal mast, and then you'll have one light to the left and then one kind of diagonally below it to the right, and both of those lights will be clear for the next block. It's not any better than if you just had a green over a red. A green over a green is the same thing. It's just a B&M nuance. And they're called double clears or super clears. It doesn't mean you can go any faster. So here on the blocks is where you can also change your speeds. So this will help the logic for the signals that are already built in the JMRI under the NORAC logic, because we're taking all of these interlockings and the blocks, you know, either the westward block or the eastward block, and we're giving them a speed. Now, pretty much everything on the main line, the double track main line of the layout, so CPA Toma through CPA Mandrake, is going to be normal speed, actually limited speed. So you're not going to get too much that you're going to have to worry about in there. There is one nuance, which is, again, over an Amoskeag, over at CPA Amoskeag, and that goes into the interlocking and then onto the yard lead. So all the switches on the main line are high-speed switches, so you really don't have any slowdowns on there. But when you were going from Amoskeag track 1 or 2 into the yard lead, you were coming into a number 6 switch. So that one, we're going to have to drop that down to a slow speed. So, and then you're going to get a restricting into that anyway, because once you get into that switching lead on Amoskeag yard, there's it's just a switching signal. It doesn't really give you any indication as to whether or not the track is occupied. It really more gives you an indication of where the switch is lined. If it's red, like I said, it's on a dwarf. It's red. The switch isn't lined for you. If it's or yellow restricting, then you can proceed through it. You know, like I said, it doesn't generally give you occupancy, although it can. I'm sure Matt will take a look at it and he'll make it do occupancy, or he'll correct me on it, because I say what it is based upon what I've watched it doing working on the railroad and what it's done for me, but I'm sure he knows a lot more. Like, he uses relays and stuff for all this. Like, so when you're going in the signal masts, so let's add a signal mast here. And you get all this stuff like limited clear, approach limited, all this NORAD crap. These are all just Boolean operations. He will actually use physical relays. So if you ever see the Dry Hill Model Railroad Club's layout at the Springfield show, Matt's done pretty much all that signaling. He's obviously had some help with some other people, but it's pretty much him. And then same thing with the New England Rail Club over in Shirley, Mass. All that signaling is him. And he uses relays to go, if it's this, it's that basically just physical hardware Boolean operations. I prefer doing it in the computer. I can figure it out. I cannot figure out that stuff. So one of the other things that I'm looking at doing in this, on the very first Amoskeag Northern, when I went from HO to N back around 2006 on the large layout, the 22 by 40 foot layout, I had used the operations section of JMRI, which I really like. It creates a train lists, switch lists, and all that stuff. One of the things I've been kind of tinkering with a little bit, and another thing I like about the Raspberry Pi, and one of the reasons I got it, was that I can set it up to be an RFID reader. So around Amoskeag Yard, and then CPA Toma, and basically CPA Toma, CPA Amoskeag, and CPA Mandrake, I'll have RFID readers, and those RFID readers will create train lists for you. And I can also feed that back to the system, so where certain train tags will identify what trains they are. Because I don't use transponding and I don't use Railcom. I may look at using Railcom, but I'm kind of more interested in this RFID tag thing. And one of the things I also want to do with the RFID tags is, it's basically like a lazy man's LCC, the layout command control stuff. I want to use the RFID tags to activate train station announcements. So there's a MBTA commuter station on the east end of the layout, about a half mile before CPF Mandrake. And on that, I want to be able to have ID tags in the engine and the cab car on those trains, so that when they are approaching that station, there's an actual audio sound that is triggered, giving you the inbound or outbound train information for that train. And I've been kind of looking around and tinkering with some stuff and doing some research online on YouTube and the internet to kind of see how you can do that stuff on here. So that is how those are set up. Let's take a look at what I'm using to kind of keep track of it outside of JMRI. All right, so outside of JMRI, I'm just using Inkscape, which is a vector-based drawing system. I use this for all my decal graphics and artwork for my 3D projects and whatnot. It's basically like Corel Draw, but free. And I like free. So I've drawn a paper size, a regular 8.5 by 11 size diagram for each of the interlockings. And this is kind of just a way for me to kind of visualize the actual interlocking itself. So we have the signals for the eastbound signals, the westbound signals for track 1, track 2. And then we have an upright visual representation of that for the west track and the east track down here. So this will allow me to put the block numbers down here and then the signal mast numbers down here on the bottom. And then next to each head, because these are triple target searchlights, I can put the signal mast number. So that way I can quickly look at each sheet for each interlocking and go, okay, yep, for Toma, you know, westbound, or the westward signal, or the west limits, for CPA Toma on track 1, it is going to be signal mast L1234, and it has heads LS16, LS162, and LS163, so whatever numbering system I decide to do there. So that way I can just look at it and go, yep, that's what I need. And I can go back at JMRI, I plugged it in right, and that way when I go back to the layout, when I get everything all plugged in and all the signals set up, and they don't work, I only have myself to blame for it. So that's pretty much what that does. So again, this is Steve Todd's build on the Raspberry Pi 4. I'm pretty sure you can use it with the 2 GB version. I think they come in a 1, a 4, and an 8 gig on the Raspberry Pi 4. Let's double check that here. Oh, so 2, 4, and 8 that you can get. I did get the 8 gig. With some other stuff that I was kind of looking at doing with the network, or the layout network, I kind of wanted a little bit more RAM on it, especially where it's going to be using dual monitor. So the Raspberry Pi 4 supports dual HDMI monitors in 4K, and it was recommended you can do it on the 4, but it was recommended you could do it with an 8, especially if you're going to be running some other Windows. And where JMRI runs some other internet-based Windows, I just kind of wanted a little bit more on that, so that was what was recommended. And this is what it looks like without the case. I mean, I'm sure you've all seen a Raspberry Pi, for crying out loud. All right, so that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, just shoot me some comments below, and I'll see if I can answer them for you. This is kind of going to be some learning steps for me. So you'll be, if you haven't used a Raspberry Pi on your layout before, you can follow along with me, because I will show you plenty of the screw-ups that I'm going to do. Because like I said, I'm not that big into Linux. I've used it here and there. I've had to use some variances for networking stuff when I was in college and when I was running my networking company. But on an everyday thing, especially over the last 20 years, it's not something that I do every day. So I'm not that familiar with it. But it seems easy enough now that it has a graphical interface, so I'm sure it's a lot easier than it used to be. So we'll take a look as we get further along here, and we'll get it hooked up to the layout. Thanks.